Cool. I'm going to get started. Thank you all for coming along. I thought 3 o'clock on the last day, second last talk, I might actually get away with it and not have to do a talk. Yeah, as I said, thank you all for coming along. So I want to explain a bit about my talk, about why I wanted to do it up front, because I realized the title is a little bit clickbaity. Like, it couldn't be any more kind of buzzwordy if, you know, unless I had blockchain in there as well. This is something that about a year ago, Microsoft came to Redify and wanted them to join their enterprise, or sorry, their DevOps fast track program. And Redify nominated me, so I went over and worked with Microsoft, learned about their DevOps story, which I'm sure you've heard from some people here at the conference. And the point of it is that the fast track program is that I help customers of Microsoft to improve their DevOps processes. And sorry, lost my train of thought completely. Yep. And when I first started chatting with Microsoft about what I did, my experience, I mentioned that I'd done quite a bit of mobile. And they've now started referring to me as a mobile DevOps expert. So when they first said it, my reaction was like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just DevOps. It's not, there's no difference in mobile, really. But it actually hit a nerve. So I had quite a few companies that I've gone out and worked with now who are having trouble with their mobile DevOps. So it kind of is a thing, you know? Yeah, so that's the kind of the story behind it. And in the abstract, I did kind of allude to that I was going to build a release pipeline live. And I tried live coding that, and it takes a lot more than an hour to do that, because it is actually quite finicky. So I'm going to show you a pipeline. I've set one up. It's real. It's actually going to push a mobile app out to my device through Intune. So all the way from commit right through to production live. So we'll have a bit of that. But first I wanted to kind of talk through the kind of things that I talk to those customers about, the concerns that I think they should be looking at, and the aspiration that they should be going for. The fast track program itself is only 2 weeks, so I don't really get a lot of time to work with them. And for the most part, it's kind of continuous delivery is what the focus is, because that's what a lot of them can't really do very well. And it's quite strange, like, because these companies have very mature kind of DevOps processes in place, but they just can't get it going for mobile apps for some reason. And I think it's kind of to do with a little bit with how finicky it is. Like, for, you know, if you're building a normal web app, it's fairly easy to kind of get everything in place and get it working quickly. For a mobile app, if you're targeting Android and iOS, you've got a whole heap of stuff that you've got to get in place up front and have them available. And then you just get weird errors. It just kind of stops working sometimes randomly, which will probably happen today when I'm showing you. Cool. So DevOps is not just about tool chains. It's not just about continuous delivery. It's much, much more than that. And one of the first things I look at when I go into these teams is their process and agility. You can usually tell pretty quickly from where they are, where they are in their kind of journey by how well they do that sort of stuff. Yeah. Sorry. I need my speaker notes. So the kind of thing that we're looking at is work planning, how they kind of prioritize and how they schedule work. Ideally, we want them to get to a single backlog that they're all working off. A lot of times I've gone into companies where they don't have any backlog. It's like Excel management. All of their work is kind of tracked in email and spreadsheets. We want to be leveraging that backlog then to do not only the work that the team wants to do, or needs to do, but also their improvement and any planning, any improvement planning that they want to do in that. We also look at dependency management, and I don't mean code dependencies, I mean dependencies within the organization. Quite often you'll find that there's a real division of labor, like we've all seen, a separate IT department. Some of these companies that I've gone into actually have a separate person who looks after Apple certificates. That's their job. It's their only job, is they look after that Apple account. So getting something from them is actually quite difficult because they don't want to give you anything because that's their job. So when I told them about Fastlane, they were quite upset. Also want to look at their how they approach managing their work and managing their work in progress. Ideally, we want them limiting that work in progress. You'll often find with teams that they'll kind of spread the work out for however many people there are, rather than focusing on delivering things across the board. So they're never really kind of finishing anything. They've got a lot of stuff in progress. And along with that, looking for a good definition of done, a well-defined kind of set of criteria, what it means for something to be done. Ideally, that is in production with real telemetry coming back to say whether or not it has worked. And development and operations collaboration as well. It's very, very important for any DevOps organization or an organization that wants to move to a DevOps culture to have that collaboration between them. And that might be something like, developers are on call as well, the same way that operations are. Cool. And one of my favorite ones is access to production. Oftentimes you'll see developers will request access to production from operations and be firmly told no. As a developer myself, I don't actually want access to production. I don't want to be able to log into production. I just want to be able to deploy to it and get the logs that I need off from it. But I don't want my account to ever be the account that gets compromised and is used to destroy production. So that's my kind of take on it. We also look at version control. So ideally, everything should be in version control, including your pipeline. And that means you're going to have to use YAML. So that's unfortunate, but it's much, much better than the alternative. And branching policy. So ideally, I'm trying to get these teams to move to short-lived branches with a pull request workflow. That requires moving to or being able to support feature flags, so that you can actually continuously deploy, but hide the features that are in development from production, but your code is still going out there. And code dependency management as well. So ideally, they're using some sort of package management system to pull whatever their dependencies are. And they also deploy to that as well. So where they're using or where they're deploying binary packages, they're deploying that to an artifact repository, as opposed to putting it into a file share somewhere or sending it out over email. And probably the big one, continuous delivery. So ideally, their build process is triggered by a commit. They have automated tests. Changes are deployed with progressive exposure control and telemetry. They have environment management in place. So they may have a dev test and production environments that they automatically release to. And ideally, new feature rollout is a continuous deployment. In terms of cloud and infrastructure, at Redify, we're very much a cloud-first company. So is our sister company, Cloud. Lol. But we see the benefits of cloud a lot, and we do try and encourage our customers to move to it. I think some of the concerns that people have around moving to cloud in terms of data sovereignty or security, I honestly think if you look at it, it's Google, Microsoft, or Amazon. If you think your security team is better than theirs, you're probably kidding yourself a little bit. And the benefits that you get from cloud are immense, like the quality of service, the ability to scale, the ability to roll out. Sorry, I'm getting, my phone is, hey? No, it's okay. Sorry, yeah. So also management of passwords and other secrets. Ideally, we would never see passwords of any type in source code. Unfortunately, I see it all the time, like literal passwords, like usernames and passwords hard-coded in. So we should be scanning for that, any bad things in code and other secrets. And ideally, we should be putting passwords and secrets into a secure store. My personal favorite is Azure Key Vault. It is amazing. It's where you should put all of your secrets and all of your keys, if you can. Cool. So in testing then, we are looking at automation. So ideally, we would like to run automated tests with every single pull request. I typically wouldn't run UI tests at pull request because UI tests, especially for mobile, are super, super slow. You're looking at 10, 15 minutes, so really slows things down. But I would definitely run unit tests. I actually pare down, I'll show you the YAML file for it, but I pare down the build to just a debug build for both iOS and Android and unit tests, because even that is relatively slow. Like you'll see in VSTS, Azure DevOps. You'll see in Azure DevOps that's running about 6 minutes. So that's a long kind of cycle time for your developers to get feedback on their code. And try as I might, I have encouraged every developer I've ever worked with on a mobile project to build both iOS and Android before they commit, before they push, but they never do. So you'll have people who will work on Android and people who work on iOS, and they'll never like compile the other to check it. So having that kind of check on your PR, almost like a gated build, is great for that fast feedback. We're also looking at code maintainability and reliability. We only want to support short-term technical debt. A lot of the mobile apps that I see in customers are kind of afterthoughts. It might be like a mobile version for a web app that they have, or it's something that, you know, Jimmy, the junior developer, kind of coded up on the weekend. And it's just thrown together. There hasn't been a lot of work done on making the code maintainable or making it reliable. And as part of the continuous improvement that the team is doing, I look to focus on good testing practices. So things like we want to test behavior, not implementation. We don't want to write unit tests for stuff that we don't need to. Every test that we write then becomes a piece of code that we also have to maintain on top of that. And security testing should form part of that too. That's code being reviewed by other people before it's committed, so that the other people in the team have visibility or can help spot things that may be a security risk. We'll go into a bit more detail on security in a bit. And specifically for mobile apps and testing, you should be testing cross-device and as many devices as you can. And I know that's easy to say. It's actually quite hard to do. But it is very valuable. It's something we should be aiming for in our mobile applications. And in terms of monitoring and observability for your mobile apps, we want instrumentation into production. We want to be able to see end-to-end transactions. So I'm going to show you VS App Center. Has everyone heard of Visual Studio App Center? Yeah? Your silence would be taken as a yes. Then we're going to have a look at that. But with App Center, you can get telemetry, so you can log analytics, crash statistics, and we can actually ship them all out from VS App Center into Azure Brain Logs. Log analytics. So you can bring all of your analytics together there and get that end-to-end transaction view from your mobile app right through to your back end. In terms of culture then, this is a very, very important part of DevOps. That really, to me, is what DevOps is. It's a cultural change rather than a technology change. And And I'm looking at things like organizational decision making. For a lot of the companies that I work with, it's, I guess, leadership don't really they don't set guardrails and let the teams go. They're very much kind of involved. And oftentimes you'll have a lot of different stakeholders kind of coming in with very different opinions on what should and shouldn't be there. The amount of times I've heard senior executives saying we need an app is too much. And they don't understand why. They just feel like they need an app because we should have an app for that. So part of the work I do with the teams is in kind of helping them to figure out how they can communicate back with their leaders to, I suppose, help them to understand better what their role should be and what their involvement should be. I'm also looking for team cooperation. So ideally, you have kind of good inter-team communication going on between them. As a consultant, it's sometimes easier for me to come in and kind of point out bad behaviors between teams and lack of communication between teams. Even in going through the startup of the fast track program, I can kind of point out things like this, like, do you talk to your IT team? Do you have to log a ticket to get something done? Could you just call them, chat to them? I'm also looking at the actual corporate governance as well. So are there like processes in place? Is there a CAB, change advisory board, that's in place that you have to go through to get code released? They're pretty much red flags for me. I don't think we're going to be able to get a fully automated pipeline if there's a CAB in there. It's definitely a big blocker. And in terms of measurement, we're looking at as much kind of measurement as we can. So this is around things like code quality. We want to do analysis in production as well. And we want to actually make decisions with real application data, usage data. So rather than guess about what our customers want or what the users of the app want, we're actually able to use real data to be able to drive those decisions. Cool. And I've also tried to help the team start to think of, what's the desired outcome for this? Oftentimes we kind of focus on implementing a feature, like we've got to get this feature out to do this. But we don't really focus on what the desired outcome is for it. So working with them to kind of figure out, working with them to kind of change that mindset a little bit is how they focus on those outcomes. We also want to, obviously, with DevOps, there's the whole promise of going faster, of being able to deploy hundreds of times a day. I've often, I've spoken to a lot of companies who've said, I don't need to deploy, hundreds of times a day. I don't really need to be able to deploy in 5 minutes because I'm never going to deploy every 5 minutes. And I'm like, that's kind of not the point. It's not that you, can deploy every 5. Sorry, it's not that you have to deploy every 5 minutes. It's that you can deploy in 5 minutes. So if you've got a bug, if you've got an issue in your system, you're able to redeploy a fix out to that in 5 minutes. That's the point of it. So ideally, we want to be able to deploy as frequently as we need to. That often flows with the kind of cadence of a company, which is quite interesting. You'll often see that they want to be able to deploy the same speed that their company kind of operates. We want to reduce the kind of lead time for changes. We want to reduce the length of time for service restoration. And ideally, we want to reduce the percentage of changes which result in a degraded service or application. Cool. And specifically for mobile app development, what I'm looking at are things which we've kind of mentioned already, really. Telemetry. Are they doing telemetry from the mobile application? What's their release cadence from the mobile application? Are they staying up to date with OS releases? A lot of companies don't. I've gone in and seen very, very old versions from 3 or 4 years back that have never been updated. And they're okay for the moment, but eventually they're going to break as the OS updates as well. Also looking at, do they have that kind of crash and performance issue management? And are they looking at that for usage metrics? I showed them this to scare them a little bit. This is the attack surface for a mobile application. It's from Now Secure. I'm not going to read out all of this stuff. there's a lot of stuff there, but you can see there is actually a lot that you have to consider when you're thinking about security for your mobile application. And it flows back to your API backend as well. That's something that I really see a lot of, is that there's not much thought put into protecting those APIs. Often people won't even put a CNAME in front of it. So your mobile app is going out kind of hard-coded, looking at an API that you can never redirect without redeploying your application. So my first thing is at least put a CNAME in front of it. Ideally, put some API management in front of it. I think people think that my app is the only thing that's ever going to touch this API, so they're not too worried about it. But you've got to treat that API as it's open. You know, it's purely open. You haven't secured it in any way. We'll take a look at the top kind of 5 mobile security failures, and this is from that same company. So the first is data at rest with insecure data storage. So this might be going out to an SD card on Android. It might just be on the device itself, unsecured. If you're storing any sensitive data, particularly for an offline mobile application, or even if you're storing it like anywhere in memory, you need to secure that data storage at rest. So that's encrypting that data within whatever mechanism or whatever storage you're using there. Data in motion with insecure communication. So that's people not using SSL for their APIs. Just going over HTTP. And I do see that a lot, way more than I'd like to. Oftentimes it's with companies with internal applications. So the idea is, well, I have to be on my network to be able to access the application. So I don't really need to go over SSL. There's no reason not to be going over SSL everywhere. You should be. App and backend functionality with insecure extraneous functionality. That's where people have put in like developer tools. I see this a lot, particularly in mobile apps, where they want to switch maybe features on and off, or they want to switch what kind of API they're talking to. So they'll build in these developer tools that let them do that sort of stuff, and they leave them in production. They're there like waiting for, you know, magic taps to open them or something like that, like if you tap here 5 times. But they're there. People will find that. People will find that stuff in your application. App functionality with insecure client code quality. So this is where just shoddy code, people not doing kind of proper checking on data or information that they're taking in, opening themselves up to vulnerabilities like SQL injection attacks and all the usual kind of security suspects. And the last one is specifically targeted at Android. So there's a lack of obfuscation, which exposes mobile apps to reverse engineering and attacks. Now, obfuscation only kind of gets you partway there. Ideally, what you should be doing is not putting anything sensitive in there. If you treat your mobile app as it's going to be public code, and you can obfuscate it, make it hard for people to get into it, but they're going to be able to get to it. So you've got to think about what kind of stuff you're putting into your app and what kind of logic is in there and what you're exposing within that. Cool. Any questions on any of that before I jump into a demo? Cool. Ooh. Okay. Let's say a prayer to the demo god. Switched. Cool. Okay. So how's that at the back? Is that somewhat visible? Yeah. Cool. All right. So this is the YAML file, the YAML file of doom. Setting it up with in the visual designer is one thing. YAML is a whole different level of finicky pain. So, like I said, I'll quickly jump over. That's my PR build. So that's just the build for iOS, Android, and kicking off the unit tests. This is the production build. It's immense. It's huge. So a lot more kind of that needs to go into it. But I'll kind of step through it. I'll bump. Cool. Go away. Dear God. Okay. So first up, what we're doing is we're splitting it into two. That way we can parallelize these builds. Typically tend to run Android on Windows builds, and iOS obviously on Mac. This particular application that we're building, which I probably should have mentioned up front, is a Xamarin application, Xamarin Forms to be specific, because I thought that was more enterprisey than everything else. But the same kind of flow, the same pipeline will work for most native or hybrid applications as well. So up first, we are obviously kicking off doing the usual kind of stuff, NuGet tool installer, firing up NuGet to restore packages, then also installing Git version. So if you haven't heard of Git version, it's definitely something worth looking at. It lets you do semantic versioning from your Git repo. And can I bump that up? So, this is in the repo that we're working in with the application, and Git version has run, so it's given me a major minor patch of 0.132. And the next time I make a commit, that patch number will automatically increment. This is using the mainline config for Git version, which is only supported in the beta, which, by the way, if you are using, you should switch over to using the CLI, because there's a couple of issues that haven't been fixed. So Git version is what lets us do that our version number. We then inject that version number in, and it's used for all the application builds. We can also replace the assembly versions with Git version as well. It will do that automatically for you. So your actual assembly versions inside your Xamarin application have the same version number too. Then I'm kicking on into Sonar Cloud. So if you haven't heard of Sonar Cloud, it's the cloud version of Sonar Cube. That lets you do static analysis of your code. There's a lot of different rule sets out there as well that you can use. So if you want to look at things like security, like checking for passwords and credit card numbers, you can load those up too. Cool. The next one is this is always a super fun part of mobile development, and one of the trickiest as well sometimes too. Actually setting the version number and the app bundle name of the application itself. In Android, it's not so much of a big deal. One thing to note though is it uses a version code number, so that's an incrementing integer number rather than the major minor patch version number that we use. So we have to have an incrementing number that bumps up with it. Go away. Android doesn't respect your do not disturb. So we set them in. Then we finally get around to actually building Android. We do an Android signing with the key signer, or with our key store, passed in, and down to running VS tests for the unit tests, building the UI tests. I'll explain why we do this in a bit, and we then copy the binaries, the output from those UI tests, and we put them in with the artifact repository with the Android build as well in there too. Jumping over to iOS, very similar. We're installing the Apple certificate, the P12 the P12 certificate, grabbing the mobile provision or the provisioning profile for the iOS app itself. Running Git version again, so we get that same. This is on a different agent, so we need to run those things. We take a bit of a hit in having to redo those, so we can parallelize the two builds. Again, same, we replace version number in the info p list and the bundle identifier as well into netredify emdo. And we built iOS, and we copy the IPA file, so the actual app file itself, out into the artifacts directory. And like I was talking about, kind of securing your files, so your key store for Android, your provisioning profile, and your P12. This isn't something that your developers need, certainly not for your production build. They don't need access to it. They just need to be able to use it in their pipelines. So I'll often set it up in either in Key Vault or if I can't do that within VSTS itself, there is a library. Jesus, Azure DevOps. There is the library component within pipelines, Azure pipelines, which lets you source secure files and also variable groups. So within here, my passwords for my APK are defined. The passwords for the key store, are defined in there, and the developer doesn't need access to that. They never need to be able to see it. You can also import variable groups from Key Vault itself directly, so pull them in from there. Secure files aren't quite there. You've got to do a bit of work for those. Cool. So that's my build pipeline. So we're doing kind of quite a lot in there. I might kick it off. It's going to take about 10 minutes, and then we can have a chat about something else while we wait. But yeah, so once that build completes, we've got effectively 3 kind of artifacts. We've got our UI tests, our Android app, our Apple iOS app, all ready to go, ready to be released. And I'm doing the release through VSTS, Azure DevOps, Azure pipelines. You could just go directly to App Center. So I'm not really sure if everyone does know what App Center is. So Visual Studio App Center is kind of the next iteration of a few different Microsoft products. Mainly kind of Hockey app, if you've probably heard of that before. But there's a few other products wrapped up in there. And as you can see, or hopefully see from the left there, it does support build, test, distribute, diagnostics, analytics, and push notifications. And it is a very, very cool product. If you're building a mobile app for yourself, you could do it all in here. And it supports React Native, it supports Xamarin Forms if you feel like that. It supports native as well, I think. And it's pretty much everything you need to spin an app up pretty quickly. We're only going to use a few features of it. So we're going to use the test. So this is the equivalent of Xamarin Test Cloud. This is the kind of next version of that. I've set up a device in there, an Android device. I've just realized that every single device I have, even in my emulator, is a Pixel. So should probably be use a bit different devices. We're also going to use the distribute. And what distribute lets you do is similar to Hockey app. You can actually distribute it to a group. So you can set up that group within App Center, and they'll receive an email. They can tap on that email. It will then load the app file, and they can install it then, kind of side load it from there. What's awesome is that it also supports Intune. That's the only MDM or MAM that it supports at the moment. But it does all of the hard work of figuring out the Intune API. You can do this yourself with any MDM. If it has an API available to it, you can deploy to those directly. And you can do some pretty cool stuff with Google for Enterprise. So if you're deploying an Android app into an enterprise organization and you have Android for Enterprise, you can deploy and promote through the Google store as well, and that will push it into your enterprise store. So we've got 2 different groups set up here for Intune, a test and a prod. And what I'm hoping to show here is that this is that kind of progressive rollout of an application. So back in my pipelines, I've got 3 environments. The first one being dev. Now, they all look pretty much the same, because they all kind of are the same. I'm first up on the dev environment. I'm just deploying straight to App Center. So it's going to go to the default group. So they're my developers. They're going to get that version of the app. Then I'm kicking off the UI tests after the fact. So the reason for that is that the developers can get the app onto their device, and we kick off the tests to make sure that everything kind of still works separately. You could do this anywhere in your pipeline. The reason that I don't do it in that main build is that it is just so slow. Like, this build is 10 minutes, as is. Waiting for a device, and this isn't just App Center test, this is most test farms or test device farms that you go to, can take up to 10 minutes to get particular devices, to be able to provision them. And then it is actually quite expensive as well, using those test farms. Cool. Okay, then back in. Come on, you can do it. Awesome. Damn it. So yes, then in test we are just doing a release. So I'm just releasing Android for this example. We're releasing Android, but we're releasing it to a security group within Intune. So that might be my friendly coworkers who don't mind if an app might be a little bit buggy, but they want to get it early. They want to use a lot. So maybe your power users. And then obviously on the next one is production. So that will go to everyone. Production in this case is Donna at the back of the room there. Cool. So with that setup, we have kind of everything we need to be able to do a continuous deployment of an application. So I'm going to do a little touch, a loop, and I'm also going to tag this release. I talk a lot about not YOLOing into master, but I'm just about to YOLO into master. Yeah. Touch. You're not tweeting that, are you? Okay, so we're going to try that again. We're going to tag that as v1.1. So Git version is going to use this now. So if I run Git version again, you'll see that it's bumped the version number there to 1.1.0. So there's a few different mechanisms you can use to do that. I prefer tagging as a good one. It's a good way to be able to kind of find it back, and Git version will then update on top of that for every commit. So I think if I just git push, I might need to do that. No, cool. Right, so that has kicked off the build pipeline. This is all lies, by the way. I didn't only ever build this once. Cool, okay, it's gone. We'll just sit with that for a minute. And if you notice up here, so this is the build number that was generated for us. Git version is going to replace that for us to make it a bit nicer. So come on. Just want to make sure this goes to that 1.1, that I did actually get that tag was pushed. Yeah, go for it.
So I never used like Azure DevOps or Microsoft App Store. I used to use the VSTS. I haven't touched it for a while, but last time I've been using it, most of my issue was it was throwing some errors, like error code block exit 1, something like that. Like you had no idea.
Yeah.
When you look at the logs, you had no idea where this error comes from. So I had to like go through one by one all your codes and all your like sign-in packages and stuff, just find it by yourself. And is there any way, is this gonna happen in here sometimes as well? Or?
You can run a build with enhanced logging, they call it. But yeah, you get pretty good logs out of this. Yeah. Okay, so that didn't work. I don't know what I missed.
Push -- tags.
Damn it. Sweet. I'm going to stop that build. It is VSTS. They've just renamed it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess I should probably point that out. Like, this is meant to be a VSTS or an App Center sales job. I work with a lot of different build systems. All of this stuff will work pretty much the same. Obviously, you'll have to change your YAML probably, but we're working TeamCity or Jenkins or any of those, and Octopus Deploy. Cool. All right, that's kicked off. I'm going to, it's building on the tags. Bugger. Hard fail. Okay, so we're going to leave that go, and as that builds, and we'll roll it out from there. So I want to jump back in while that goes. Sweet. Actually, and I just want to talk about something that we call in Redify kind of MVP thinking, and it's something that I work with the teams that I work with, that I try to get across to them about how they approach kind of building their applications. I see a lot of mobile apps that are just these absolutely massive, kind of huge sections of different functionality, and companies try and smash everything into that one app. They want the one app to do all of everything, and it's usually called the app. Like genuinely, like in its source code, it's called the app because nobody could ever name it. It was too hard to name it. So, and this is an approach we kind of take in everything. It's about kind of slicing up what you're going to deliver. I'm taking a DevOps kind of mindset approach to it. We should be hypothesizing, going back to what I was saying about the CEOs who want an app. They should know why they want an app. And there should be a very real reason for what we're building, and what it's going to do, what the outcome from it will be. So you've probably heard of an MVP before if you've seen this or something very like it, and this is fine. I think it's probably gotten a bit of a bad rap recently in terms of MVPs, and what it means. A lot of the times it's just people build crap, and it's like it's an MVP. That's not what it's about at all. It's about building something that is potentially useful all the way along. But I tend to actually not use the MVP word too much anymore when I'm talking to people. Henrik Nieberg from Spotify had a very good quote, and perhaps a better term is minimum lovable product. A bicycle is a lovable and useful product for someone with no better means of transport, but is still very far from the motorcycle that it will evolve into. So like putting that into perspective, if you were designing a product for someone that was going to get them from work to home, and they live 50 kilometers outside of the CBD, if you give them a skateboard, they're not going to be able to use that to get to work. That's useless to them. They're not going to love that. If you give them a bike, they will dress head to toe in Lycra and meet in large groups at coffee shops. They'll love it. So that's a minimum lovable product. And they're all kind of great ideas. It's actually quite hard for people to conceptualize what that would look like in an app. So I made one. This is probably something like a lot of you have seen. This is a real app, by the way. This is the iOS version of it as it was designed at the time. It's since moved on. But if you have a look at what it is, it's basically a WhatsApp clone, like a chat app clone. There's a lot of other sections as well. Down the bottom on the navigation bar, there's lots of other functionality in there. So it's this company have stuffed everything into this one application. And they want this WhatsApp clone. Now, they could just use WhatsApp. That's a quick win. Just let your people use WhatsApp. But they want it in their app. Strange kind of thinking. But if you look at everything that's there, there's quite a bit in it. So at the top, we've got a picture of Jane. We can see Jane's name, when she was an employee since. She has some expert points, so we have to build something that collects expert points. There's a link to more about you, so we need to integrate and get information out of a system to get more information about Jane. And then we have the Teams chats, the actual chat groups themselves. This is the point, the functionality that they want. And it's quite pretty. You can see there's like a name for each group, and there's pictures of the latest people who posted, maybe, not quite sure. And a lot of times when we approach, I think everything, not just mobile apps really, we look at building the whole thing. We think of like how, what have we got to do to build that? That was creepy. What have we got to do to build the whole application? When that's not really the kind of the MVP mindset that we're looking for. So we could start with something like this. We pare it down to the minimum set of functionality that makes it useful. And with this in particular, like this is a chat app. So what's useful about it is, do people use it to chat? So we want to be, put it out there, see if it's used, see if they're using it to actually talk to each other. And then we might kind of look at some of the other features. People do really, really like having photos of themselves. It makes them feel better about applications. It's a strange thing. CEOs in particular. If you're ever doing a presentation to a CEO, put their photo on it. Cool. And then maybe, we might kind of carry on and we might keep going. If we're still getting value out of adding these additional bits of features in, then we might carry on and keep kind of going to it. Eventually getting to the expert points things and adding it in. But we might stop at this. If this gives us the value, if this has everything in it that we need, that we wanted to get out of it, then we don't need to build the rest of it. Cool. So that's a little segue. And jump back. How are we going? Oh, God. Okay, well, iOS succeeded. What are we on? 14 minutes. I don't think we're going to do it. Okay, I'm going to pivot and kick on to, so I'm running Genymotion. So this is the app that we have. This is a little bit of a secret tip, okay? Anthony Borton told me this from Microsoft. Qantas kind of holds on to particular seats, the best seats, and doesn't make them available on the seat selector until 40 hours before your flight departs. So if you jump on right at 40 hours before your flight departs, you can get like the good seats. So apparently there's one on the, I don't know what it is, one of the 737-800s, where you can actually get like a bit more leg room because it's where it goes from 2 to 3 or something like that. So that's what this is for. And basically you put in your flight time, so the date and time of your flight, and then you hit calculate, and it tells you you'll need to check seat availability at 4 p.m. on Sunday, blah, blah, blah. Cool. But, oh, man. Demo gods. Excellent. I was just about to do that anyway. So I'm going to restart it, fire it up. And the one thing that I want to show you here is feature flags. So it's going. I'd recommend Launch Darkly. It's probably one of the most popular ones. It's an amazing, amazing app. It lets you kind of target users and segments. You can turn on and off individual feature flags for individuals, for people, as well as, this is what you can use to hide that in development features that you have. Cool. Okay, so it's fired back up, calculate, it works, everything's great. And we're going to jump into Launch Darkly, and I'm going to turn on this feature flag. So I need to type in the name of the, turn it on. Cool, so I'm going to restart my application. And cross everything. Boom. So I've turned on the feature flag, which has now enabled 2 buttons. The first is crash, and the other is error. I kind of realized I put crash on a flight app. That's, yeah. I didn't really think of it. And these are going to push crash and error analytics into App Center for us. App Center itself, or the SDK for it, is stupidly simple to install for your apps, and it has one for most platforms or languages. I don't know what you call it. For Xamarin Forms, it's literally like 4 lines of code, and you've got everything. It's amazing. Cool. So we're going to jump into diagnostics. So I'm not sure how this will work on an emulator, but I'm going to try and fire off an error. I should probably turn off the debugger. Go away. Yeah, I'm going to stop it. Where are we going? There we go. Okay. So fire through an error. Beautiful. Right, so then when I fire it up again, don't make a liar of me. Collecting data. Keep stopping, yeah. So this is the one part I didn't check. Well, that's not true. There's loads of parts I didn't really check. Okay. Hey? Yeah. I know what I'm doing, Rob. Come on. All right, that sucks, but you kind of get the idea, yeah? That you can hit them. I'll show you the code for it. It's not there. Where is it? No, there. Well, there we're just like kind of going crashes, track error, so we're able to actually catch a known error that we're looking for, and we're able to track that separately from a crash. Then in the application itself, when we click on an event, so when someone checks availability, it fires through analytics for checking the availability. Actually, that should be there. Where's that? Damn it. Yeah, okay, not working. But yeah, so we're able to track events through there as well. So the kind of things that I'd recommend looking at in there are not just like navigational things. Most of the time I see people kind of hitting page navigation into their analytics. But you should be looking at more at the kind of time interactions take. So if you've got some sort of form, how long does it take them to fill out that form? You want to be tracking that kind of duration statistics as much as navigation statistics for how people are using them. Or when people are rage quitting. If you've got someone who's kind of completed half of a form and then quits out of it, try and track that as well. Cool. Okay. Okay, build succeeded. Did we go? Are you going? I think, yeah, because I think it did that on the tag. I'm going to try and kick this off from... We are on, winning with 8 minutes to spare. Cool, so we've got, it's released to dev, so it's actually gone out through App Center. We should be able to see the release in distribute. And go to releases. We've got a version 1.1.0. That worked. So that's gone out to collaborators. So that's my phone spazzed out. I've actually just gotten a... Oh, why did you close? Come on. Actually, this is quite dangerous, opening up my email live on a talk. Cool. So this is the experience that the user sees. This is actually my real phone, not an emulator. They get an email from App Center. They can tap to install. That will pull down the APK, and they can install it from there. Cool. So I'm going to kick on through. I wonder if it will let me. Excellent. Test with Visual. Yeah. Okay. Test with Visual Studio App Center failed. So that was my UI test running. Thank you. What's wrong? Minimum required version is what? Huh. Okay. Haven't seen that one before. So that has failed into there, but let's completely ignore that. Let's deploy into tests. Deploy. Hey? YOLO deploy, yeah. Actually, I'm just going out of control. I've got 6 minutes. It's going to prod 2. But that's where you could do your progressive release. And actually, it's, if we took in here, oh God, oh, never mind. This is all falling apart. Not that one. You can actually set the pre-deployment conditions to be various different gates. Probably the most interesting one is you can query Azure monitor alerts. So you could actually monitor your test environment to see if there are any issues coming through from that. And if that was low enough, then fire it over to production. So that's one of the kind of, that would be pretty advanced going. Cool. So I do want to leave the page. Let's see how this has gone. It's thinking. Pre-deployment approved. Damn it. So I did put in approvals so that we would require someone to say yes before we deployed into that, considering that it is going to production environments. And I'm going to approve that too. Right, cool. So we've only got about 5 minutes left. So do you have any questions while we're waiting for those to go? Yeah. Yeah. How old is your Ionic app? Oh, okay. Yeah, I probably would give it a try. Yeah. Ionic is in particular is really finicky with versioning. So just with all of your builds, if you try and figure out what your local build kind of looks like if you're in Visual Studio, you can look at your build logs and see what it's kind of pushing. But yeah, Ionic is really finicky about what version of the framework you use to build with and what version of the CLI you use to build with. But yeah, you should be able to do that in App Center.
So one of the challenges I face is like when I create all the build pipeline, it was working in one account.
Yep.
And it was my personal account.
Yeah.
They had the company account, and then I wanted to move everything there.
Yep.
And everything got broken.
Yeah.
So is there any way to just like transfer or?
It depends on the. We're in VSTS or Azure DevOps. So with some of them, you can get your pipelines in YAML, so you can do your build pipelines in YAML now. You can actually export them. So if you create them in the. Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. That's pretty good. The YAML generator. So like you in the Visual Designer, you create your build process, and I'm not sure what's going on there. You can then export it to YAML and then pull it out. But you can export build processes themselves as well from within there. I can show you after.
Build and then just like went to export the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then when I imported, it didn't work. I had to go through the script one by one and then like see why
Okay.
it's not working.
Yeah. Okay. We can have a chat afterwards. That's cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
So we are manually doing the deploy for Apple iOS on the export.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do it here, how do you add distribution certificates? And
Yeah. That was so. Sorry, I just wanted to point out. It's there. It came through in Intune. Woo! Actually, that's not it. Damn it. Sorry. Yep, your question. Terrible. I'm sorry, I've completely forgotten. Can you say that again?
how do you add your distribution certificates?
Yes. So I was actually doing that in the YAML file, so it's as part of storing them in the library in Azure pipelines, and then dropping them in here. So there are tasks in there that let you pull those provisioning profiles and distribution certificates in from there, and then you pass them in through the build here, and they're wiped away at the end. But you could, if you wanted to go like pretty advanced, hit Fastlane, and use Fastlane to kind of help you re-provision your certificates as well, particularly on Apple. Yeah. Okay.
So one more question, sorry.
Yeah.
So when you're actually deploying it on the Apple on the website, it asks you questions. Do you have any advertising content, things like that? So how do you skip all that when you're deploying?
This is the enterprise part of it. So you can actually get an Apple Enterprise Developer account, and it lets you do a thing called an in-house distribution certificate. So an in-house release. It's specifically meant for in-house applications. Yeah. So that's it's not going to the store. It's just going to an internal release through Intune. So which is a mobile device management application. So it never goes to the store. Cool. Ooh. Okay. I am over time. Please don't feel like you have to stay here. But yeah, it appears like it's on the way through. But yes, thank you very much.